Hello, my name is Anna Grantham, and I'm the Programs Director at Hunter's Hope Foundation. Today I'll be sharing about Krabbe Newborn Screening, and I do want to note that this recording is being made in March of 2020, just because newborn screening can change very rapidly, so please just bear that in mind as you watch this recording, and please note any changes and updates on our website. So a big part of what I do at Hunter's Hope is I help families who want to advocate for Krabbe Newborn Screening in their state. And I have been privileged to help dozens of families try to make a difference in their state through adding Krabbe Newborn Screening to the legislation there. And one thing that I tell every family is it doesn't matter who you're talking to. It could be a scientist, a legislator, anyone who is making a decision of whether or not to support your efforts for Krabbe Newborn Screening. Really, the most important thing you can share with them is your story. That's something that you're an expert on, and it's what's motivated you to take action. And I believe that, what's motivating one person to take action can motivate someone else. And so for that purpose, today I wanted to share my story of how I got involved with Krabbe Newborn Screening. So this is Karis Almi. She is a friend of mine's daughter, and she was born in 2009 in Mobile, Alabama, which is where I currently live. When Karis was born, as you can see, she's beautiful. Nobody knew anything was wrong until she was about 3 months old. She was just inconsolable, crying most of the day, major feeding issues that landed her in the hospital. And when she was about 4 or 5 months old, she was finally diagnosed with Krabbe disease. So at that time, again, this was 2009, New York State was the only state screening for Krabbe. Of course, we'd never heard of Krabbe disease. We'd never heard of newborn screening, really. Even though I had 2 children, I'd never heard that word, newborn screening. But what we learned with Karis was that it was too late for her to receive the only available treatment, which is umbilical cord blood transplant. But if she had been born in New York, she could have been diagnosed early enough to be eligible for that life-saving treatment. And so when I found that out, I have to be honest, I was very angry. And it just seemed so unfair, and I wanted to do everything that I could to make a difference for kids like Karis, and that's what led me to my role at Hunter's Hope. So when I talk about newborn screening, I never want to take for granted that most people don't really know about newborn screening. Unfortunately, even though the program's been around for over 50 years, it does seem like even in the medical community, there's not a lot of understanding about what diseases are screened for and how it works. So I do always like to give a little bit of history of newborn screening, because unfortunately it seems like unless there's a problem, most people don't even know that their child underwent a screening for 50 plus diseases depending on where their child was born. So newborn screening is a state-based health program that started over 50 years ago, and it's a simple heel prick done at the time of birth, usually a day or 2 after birth. A few drops of blood are sent off to the state lab, where they screen the child for a number of diseases, and that number varies from state to state. But it's an amazing program, and it's really it runs so well, and it helps children who have diseases that could be deadly or cause irreversible damage that are so rare you wouldn't notice to test for them because of family history. It helps them have a chance at a healthy start to life. The Secretary Advisory Committee on Heritable Diseases in Newborns and Children was formed in the mid-early 2000s, maybe 2005-ish, I think, to create a list of recommended diseases that each state should include. But newborn screening implementation is still determined by each state. So that list is called the Recommended Uniform Screening Panel, or RUSP. And when it was first created, it was meant to be a bare minimum standard of what each state should be screening for. And the reason why it was created was because there was a huge disparity in what diseases and how many diseases each state was screening for. Some states were screening for 30, 40 plus diseases at this time, while other states were screening for less than 20. And that is a life-altering reality for families who have children who are affected by rare disease. So it's an extremely important minimum standard. But again, I want to stress that it was never meant to be a be-all, end-all, but again, a recommendation to get everybody up to a bare minimum standard. So, like I mentioned before, New York State was the first state to begin screening for Krabbe disease. They started in 2006. And since then, other states have added Krabbe Newborn Screening. So all the states that you see in the dark green here, New York, Missouri, Kentucky, Ohio, Tennessee, Illinois, and New Jersey are currently screening for Krabbe disease. The states you see in light green, New Mexico, Pennsylvania, Louisiana, Indiana, and South Carolina have passed laws to add Krabbe newborn screening, but are somewhere in the process of implementation, and that varies from state to state. We currently have legislative efforts in several other states. We work with families all across the country who really work tirelessly to try to add Krabbe in their state. So that's very important to us and something we will always do. It's truly a grassroots effort, and we work state to state. So even if Krabbe was on the recommended uniform screening panel, or once it is, you still have to go state by state to get the state to add that disease. So that's something that we work very hard for, and I encourage any family who wants to advocate for Krabbe newborn screening in their state to please contact me, and I would be more than happy to help you with that effort. So just to give you a little bit of background so before I talk about the content of this slide, I did want to just point out this photo here. The little boy with the big smile you see, that's Elmer, and he's actually the first child who was diagnosed and treated for Krabbe disease thanks to New York's newborn screening program. His mom is holding him, and then you see Dr. Joanne Kurtzberg from Duke, who is truly the pioneer of the treatment for Krabbe disease and is Elmer's doctor and has treated so many children for Krabbe and many other diseases. And on the other side, you see Dr. Joe Orsini, who leads the newborn screening for Krabbe program in New York State. And Elmer is such a special little boy. I'm sure you can see just through this picture, his smile is infectious. He is so full of joy and life. He's so smart. He's bilingual. And he is just a huge blessing to everyone who encounters him. When Hunter's Hope was founded in 1997, one of our key philosophies has always been to bring together all of the experts to share what they're working on and to collaborate. That's very important, and I think we really believe it's the fastest way to make the improvements needed and advancements to all leukodystrophies. So in 2015, we officially formed our Krabbe Newborn Screening Task Force, although since Krabbe Newborn Screening started, we were gathering all the disease experts and stakeholders at our Hunter's Hope Symposium each year. But in 2015, we had a special meeting with the core group of experts, and it's open to all state labs, any referral center in a state that's screening for Krabbe or will be, as well as all the leading experts in newborn screening, specifically Krabbe newborn screening and disease experts. The purpose of this group was to really look at those three gaps I mentioned earlier that were listed from the Secretary Advisory Committee to say, okay, where are we in filling these gaps? What else needs to be done? What can we do to help you make sure these gaps are filled? And then if they are filled, what needs to be done to prove they're filled? And so we've been meeting regularly in person and through conference calls since 2015. just making sure that we're making continual improvements on Krabbe Newborn Screening. One of the big projects we've been working on is clinical practice guidelines for children who have Krabbe disease and are identified through newborn screening programs. So our infantile Krabbe disease clinical practice guidelines have already been published, and you can find them on our website. And that was with a group of experts. And the purpose of that is really to help states screening for Krabbe and the clinicians there know the best practice for children with a positive screen for Krabbe. Right now, we're working on the late onset Krabbe disease clinical practice guidelines. And again, that's to make sure that any child who has a positive screen for Krabbe and is diagnosed with late onset Krabbe disease, they can have the appropriate follow-up and really know best practices. We're also working on an early infantile Krabbe disease newborn screening case study. There have been many children born in states outside of New York who have had a positive screen for Krabbe and been diagnosed with early infantile Krabbe disease and treated. So we feel like it's important to tell those stories to the medical community so that they can see how well that they're doing and that Krabbe newborn screening is truly making a difference for children affected by Krabbe disease. We also hope to have published later this year a patient perspective paper. What we did is we created a survey and sent it out made it available to any family affected by Krabbe disease, whether they have a child who was diagnosed symptomatically or through newborn screening. And we asked them several questions about their experience as well as their feelings on Krabbe disease. And we feel like that's very important to share with the scientific and newborn screening community so that we can spread awareness about the Krabbe community's desire for newborn screening and their feelings for that. We think it's very important. Finally, Dr. Joanne Kurtzberg and Dr. Joe Orsini, who you see in this photo here, have started what's called the Krabbe Newborn Screening Council. This is open to any clinician who may be in a referral center in a state that's screening for Krabbe, all state labs, as well as newborn screening experts and Krabbe experts. The purpose of this council is to continually discuss best practice and to talk through complex cases of patients who might have a late onset for Krabbe disease, just to make sure that each child is getting the chance for the best possible outcomes. If you are a clinician or scientist who is involved in the Krabbe disease space and Krabbe newborn screening space and would like to be involved with that council, please don't hesitate to email me. I'll provide my email at the end of the presentation, but it is open to all. So this slide I actually borrowed from Dr. Joe Orsini at the New York State Lab, and it just shows some algorithm changes that they've made throughout the years to their newborn screening, Krabbe newborn screening system. So I am obviously not a scientist and probably not the right person to answer any questions someone might have on this, but I did just want to include it to show that a lot of changes have been made and they've been very successful in improving outcomes and diminishing false positives for Krabbe disease. So if you have questions on this, I'm happy to refer you to some experts who can better explain them. But again, I just wanted to say that there have been lots of great outcomes from the hard work that everybody in the Krabbe newborn screening world has been doing for the last several years. Finally, I wanted to introduce you to Lennon, who is from Ohio. She is the first child who was diagnosed with early infantile Krabbe disease through Ohio's Krabbe newborn screening program. And the reason why I wanted to speak about her is one of the common criticisms about Krabbe newborn screening is that it is not practical for families to have to move to what's called an expert treatment center if they have a positive screen for Krabbe. Well, that is actually not necessary because the experts are willing to work with hometown teams who are capable of providing the treatment, so that the family does not have to move away. So as you can see, Lennon has two older sisters, and it just wasn't practical for the family to move out of Ohio for her to receive treatment. So she was able to receive treatment at Nationwide in Ohio, and that team worked very closely with Dr. Joanne Kurtzberg at Duke to make sure that Lennon was receiving the same care she would have received were she treated in or at Duke. So that's something that I want to point out, that we're working really hard to make sure that every state that's screening for Krabbe disease has the capacity to treat the children should the parents choose to stay in state for treatment. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation about Krabbe Newborn Screening. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. Please feel free to email me. My email's here on the screen. And I will either answer your questions or do my best to connect you to an expert who can. Thank you so much.